The eclipse of the moon is said to be a time of mixed blessings and uncertainty, and thus a blade finished on such an occasion would retain the power of that brief, fleeting, dark moment. In nearly all traditional cultures, the cave is deemed to be a place for spiritual retreat. The ancient Malays believed that there exists a certain cave in the spirit realm that is home to all the Keris of the world. This spirit realm is a shadow of our world and is still considered a real world by some traditional ironsmiths. There are also those that believe that some Keris were made in caves, forged by the bare hands of ascetics in a state of trance. The method of Keris making is known as pitchit, and the resulting Keris is the Keris pitchit. So to Old World Malays, the Keris was a symbol of status, of the divine, and of identity. But it is this ability to represent its owner that empowers the Keris in a rather unusual way. If a royal or dignitary wished to marry the daughter of a reluctant family, he could send his Keris to them as a forceful sign of his intentions. If, for one reason or another, a man could not attend his own wedding, his Keris can be substituted in his place. A Keris is even said to have sexual qualities. The end part of the sheath, called the buntat Keris, is the male part of the Keris and has a talismanic relationship to the pending or buckle on a woman's attire. They share a similar elliptical shape. A woman might also hide a small replica Keris in a niche behind the buckle to ward off personal harm. Different Keris of various designs are used for different purposes, and the Keris specially used for execution is known as the Keris panjang.
Keris yang ketiga yang digazetkan oleh Sultan Melaka 1459-1477 iaitu keris pembunuhan.
The executioner will stab the keris in the shoulder, and then they put some cotton here, and then they are stabbed here and through the heart. So why they use the cotton? Because when they strike back the keris, so the blood will not spill.
There are many Keris that were made purely for talismanic purposes. A particularly unusual talismanic Keris is the Keris madu. It weeps drops of honey-coloured liquid that never dry up. It is said to bring its owner a prosperous and harmonious home. Latif Long is the seventh in a generation of woodcarvers who can trace their roots to the golden age of the Malay kingdom of Patani. Having grown up with the Keris culture all his life, he is one of the few veteran Keris makers remaining today with a wealth of knowledge in Keris lore.
Selalunya kalaulah raja-raja nak pergi ke hutan iaitu memburu rusa ke apa semua, selalunya keris ini dibagikan pada permaisuri ataupun isteri, dan ada pula dia punya kata-kata dia semasa dia nak tinggal kepada isteri dia. Dia ada buku rahsia iaitu dia ada satu patung. Dia serah kepada isteri dia, permaisuri, mengatakan keris tajung selimbar lepas jatuh di kaki, kaki tak luka. Peluk cium tekan napas jatuh ke hati, hati tak lupa. Baru dia bagi kepada permaisuri, ya. Permaisuri telah pegang keris ini, menemakan keris daripada raja. Dia kata tanah sawah di tengah padang, tempat orang menanam padi, walaupun tak nampak badan keanda budi yang baik dibawa mati.
Like anything of value, a Keris must be looked after. From time to time, it must be ritually cleansed and protected against its enemy, rust. Lime is used if heavy cleansing is needed, otherwise the juice of a coconut will do. In the old days, A hollow cylinder made from bamboo was used in the cleansing ritual. However, in the modern era, where it is difficult to find such bamboo cylinders, any slim glass container long enough to soak the blade of the kris will suffice. It is left soaking in this for a short while and then rinsed. Lastly, the blade must be smoked using incense. Traditionally, kumanyang, the Malay frankincense, would be burned. But not all kris are deserving of such loving care. There are many cases of kris causing supernatural disturbances and mischief. One way of getting rid of an abominable kris is to bury it in the ground or under rocks at the base of a tree.
If the owner and the kris are supposed to be in concordance with each other, so that he would be able to mobilize the weapon for his own protection and for his own enhancement of his power. But if the kris is not in concordance with his psychology, with his spirit in him, then probably the weapon would not be there, or the weapon would be dangerous for him. So normally someone with that kind of kris will have to dispose the kris, or at least to undergo certain ritual to cleanse the kris.
But even then, there is no guarantee a kris will behave itself. In one widely told tale, a man goes walking when he hears an eerie voice out of the blue, urging him to go to a certain place, where there was something waiting especially for him, buried in the ground. As if drawn by a force, the man goes to the place and begins to dig. But little did he realise that what he had found was a cursed kris.
Untuk kita nak buang daripada kita pakai kris yang kuaka, maka ada beberapa cara. Kalau setengah pada setengah tu dia bubuh atas kaki, bubuh di atas kaki dan dia pacok di atas batang pisang. Dia peranyuk di atas kaki, dia pergi, dia lepas dengan kata-kata dia tu adalah pesanan-pesanan dia. Yang keduanya dia kambuh dalam tanah.
A kris was handed down as a family heirloom, along with the colourful stories of its own unique history.
Men, dah buat apa nak kris tu?
Some stories have become national legends, while others explain a family's history and heritage, handed down through the generations from father to son and mother to daughter. Each kris has its own story to tell.
Well, this is what we call the kris pusaka. This is the inheritance of the father or the great-grandfather to the son, to the grandson. Okay, normally this kind of kris is either kept properly and wrapped with yellow cloth or whatever, and put either in a box or something, or in a safe place. But they were also practiced during the early part of this century, where such kris pusaka is tied around what is called the tiang si, the central pole of the house. So within the Malay house there is the central pillar, and the kris are always tied within around that pillar. So it is a kind of protection for the family, and it is a kind of heritage for the family, and for that matter, the father would pass it almost ritually to the son to keep it, and normally it is kept properly as part and parcel of the inheritance of the family.
The culture of the kris is steeped in what can often be seen as superstitious beliefs. But these beliefs evolve out of the real experiences of ordinary people and have an important place in their traditional life. The true story of the ruby, the kris and the frog is steeped in symbolic language. While cleaning his fountain, Cekgu Norden, an avid kris collector, sees a clump of frog spawn. As he tries to remove it, he sees something unusual inside it. It looked like a precious stone, perhaps a ruby, a symbol of the other world of spirits. About 2 years later, a young man came to the house to show him a kris. As he opened his bag to retrieve the Kris, a frog suddenly jumped out and sat on the edge of the bag. Then, as if nothing happened, the young man put the frog back into the bag, where it stayed. Cheku Norden ended up keeping the Kris, but to this day he can't stop thinking of what happened. The ruby in the frog spawn, the frog in the bag, and the Kris all seem to be connected, but in what way? Is it true that a person can attract a Kris, and vice versa? Part of the belief surrounding the culture of the Kris is that a Kris will find and make its way to the person it wants to be with, or with whom it has some connection.
Kita nak angkat keris, cara kita nak angkat keris. Kita tarik mata kita letak sini dulu. Sesuai ke dengan aku, bagan ni. Lepas tu kita letak di kiri, sebelah rusuk. Apabila letak sebelah rusuk yang penghabisan dia pendek sebelah kiri kan, dipanggil rusuk Adam kan. Kita letak situ saja, dia naik selalu ni. Dia naik selalu ni. Maknanya bagan ni sesuai dengan kita. Tapi cara sesuai ni kita tengok pula. Rasa ni sampai hujung jari ke, sampai pusat ke atas ke, sebelah kanan kiri tak ada ke, kita ada rasa.
It is often said that the spirit of the Kris can be felt by those gifted with the knowledge of the unseen. It can often be brought for verification to those who are in touch with the spirit world. The belief is that the innocent, like young children, the mute, and the blind, can see this world. In one such case, a blind man could see the horrific history of a Kris presented to him. The Kris was correctly verified as having shed the blood of victims too numerous to imagine. Even though blind, he could sense their unspeakable pain and horror. The importance of the Kris in the lives of the early Malay community, as well as those of royalty, is evident even today, and can be seen as an important part of the attire and regalia of the present-day sultans.
Even the Yang Di-Pertuan Agong symbolizes himself when he ascends the throne with the long Kris, or the Kris Panjang, which is silhouetted with gold, embroidered in the craftsmanship of old, done by Kelantanese, and it has been there ever since.
So as an icon of Malay identity, of warriors and kings, of myths and legends, the Kris is more than just a weapon. Throughout the centuries, it has evolved and survived as part of the oral narrative tradition of a culture. And because it is part of that tradition, much of its history is bound to be lost in the impermanence of speech. So although the true story of the Kris may remain fragile and subject to debate, it remains as enigmatic as ever, with much of its stories and history lost to time.